this learning material, we will focus on the basic concepts of facilitating learning. So we have 2 weeks for this material, so you have enough time to review and listen to this video, pre-recorded video of our lesson. So at the end of this lesson, you're expected to be able to provide your own description of facilitating learning and identify ways on how to apply the 14 learner-centered principles in instruction, given that 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, you will already become a teacher. Okay, so what is facilitated learning? Okay, so facilitated learning is where the students are encouraged to take more control of their learning process. So the responsibility is given to the students, meaning to say, you as students is already in charge, responsible for your own learning. Okay, so you already have the responsibility to keep track, to assess of how much you learn, okay, to identify how you should learn. So you are given the opportunity to discuss, to have collaborative activities with your classmates, so you will be able to learn together and to learn from each other. So the facilitated learning is in contrast with the individual learning, where the trainer becomes very involved and responsive to each learner's needs. So here, the trainer's role or the teacher's role is an organizer of learning, a facilitator of learning. The teacher can may provide you with resources that you need, okay, with the supports that you need, but not to the extent that the teacher will spoon feed you with informations, just like what happened in the traditional learning. Okay, so you shape, okay, you shape your own learning goals and achievements with the help of your teacher as the facilitator of learning. So when we say facilitated learning, it is based on the premise that the more responsibility a student takes for his learning, the more effective the training or education will be. So no matter how hard the teacher will uh, provide you with the learning materials and resources, if you yourself as a student is not uh, is not motivated or is not interested to learn, then learning won't take place. Okay. So what are the advantages of the facilitated learning? First, through this one, you will be able to use skills like synthesis and analysis, and you will become actively involved because, as what I have said, in contrast with the traditional learning, where the students just sit down and listen, in facilitated learning, you act. You are an active participant. Okay, you perform and you do not just listen. You interact with each other. You learn from each other. And there is no need for large amounts of learning materials. Learners can also work in an environment similar to that of the real world. It's not just more on theory and imagination. So you are given the chance to work in an environment that where you should be working. Okay, for example, teacher. Okay, so you are given the chance to also observe how schools are run, how teachers handle classes. Okay, and a variety of learning methods are used. So, however, there are also disadvantages of this facilitated learning. And first, it can be seen to be more expensive. Okay, so the students may be needing additional materials, like for example, the laptop. Okay, the students should provide for himself because most likely the student is learning skills and tasks at home. So the pace of instruction is based on the group rather than individual learner. It's more on collaborative work. Okay, the teacher's role is not clearly defined. There is a need for extra facilities to allow group work. Okay, so like what I have said earlier, the learning is relatively time-consuming in proportion to the amount of materials covered, and facilitated learning is not appropriate in some cultural contexts. Okay, like for example, if you will be teaching in uh, mga islands, okay, or in very remote areas. So it's hard to implement and employ facilitated learning for areas with no electricity, for areas where resources are very limited. Okay. Okay. So what are or how are you going to deliver facilitated learning? First is through projects and case studies. Okay. Second is through field trips. So give the students the experience of what we said, the real world experience. Brainstorming sessions, which can be done virtual or face to face, virtual real time or physical classroom session, lectures and seminars, group activities, file and link sharing. Okay, like for example, as of now, these days, the use of Google Drive is becoming relevant, okay, due to the pandemic. So we opt to use different online platforms rather than uh, seeing the face-to-face handouts, readings, and links relevant websites, survey and polls, and online or face-to-face group discussions. That's how we can deliver facilitated learning. And of course, again, while doing this one, the teacher's role is very important to facilitate. You cannot just tell your students to read this one, read that one, research this one. So you need to facilitate your students. Okay, so let us differentiate the traditional teaching approaches and the non-traditional teaching methods. So the traditional teaching approaches are generally teacher-directed. So when I say teacher-directed, this is the type of learning or the type of teaching method that is used by the traditional teachers. When I was still a student, so this was used by our teachers where we sit down, listen, take down notes while our teacher speaks, write something on the board and discusses everything. Okay, so students are taught in a manner of sitting and listening. The students sit and listen while the teacher talks. Non-traditional, however, are commonly known as innovative or modern teaching methods that involve the use of technology, animation, special effects, and are generally learner, self-directed, and interactive in nature. That is why, as teachers, we have to keep abreast of the uh, of the of the existence of the different teaching, learning, instructional materials. We have to keep abreast of what is the trend nowadays. For example, now, what is the trend? Okay, the use of Google Classroom, the use of Google Meet, Zoom in meetings and discussions. So we need to keep abreast of that one. Even in computation of grades. Okay, so the manual computation nowadays is uh, is slowly fading. Okay, so we most of the teachers, especially the modern teachers, are already using different applications in computing the grades. Okay, just like the Microsoft Excel. Okay, so there are different non-traditional rather teaching methods. Okay, so when we say non-traditional teaching methods, again, these are evolving, innovative, interactive, and experiential. This is uh, this is an opposite to the use to traditional teaching, again, wherein the teacher speaks and the student sit down and listen. Okay, so first method, non-traditional teaching method we can use is the flipped classroom. So what is a flipped classroom? It is a pedagogical approach in which direct instruction moves from the group learning space to the individual learning space. Okay? Uh, it is a type of blended learning where students are introduced to content at home and practice working through it in school. The opposite, because in traditional, the students are introduced content in school and practice it at home through homeworks and assignments. Here, the content is given at home for the students to practice, and he's going to apply it in school. Okay, so in a common flipped classroom scenario, students might watch pre-recorded videos at home, then come to school to do the homework armed with questions and at least some background knowledge. Okay, so you study the material given by the teacher at home, write down your questions, inquiries, so you can raise that one during the face-to-face interaction in school and when you are asked to come to school. So in traditional learning, lower level of learning such as remembering and understanding is happening, while students are usually left to work on activities that involve higher level of learning outside the classroom. Okay, so in the flipped classroom, model learning is flipped, as the term implies, flipped. Okay, gibali. Okay, so flipped classroom aims to increase student engagement and learning by having them complete readings at home and work on problem solving during class time. So again, gibali siya ang traditional one. Okay. So what are the four pillars of the flipped learning? We have first, the flexible environment. Okay. So there are two types of flexible environment rather. First, teachers must create a flexible space of when and where students will choose to learn. Where and when students will choose to learn. Okay? So, second is the teachers must be flexible when it comes to the timeline of learning, how long it takes the students to learn, and how they will be assessed. So there has to be timeline. Okay? So when we say flexible environment, it does not only refer to the physical learning environment. Okay, so the physical learning space. No, it also refers to the flexibility the instructor has with what content will be taught in the classroom and what content will be taught outside of the classroom. So again, when we say flexible learning environment, it does not limit to the physical learning space. Okay? So flipped learning allows for a variety of learning modes. Educators often physically rearrange learning spaces to accommodate a lesson or unit to support either group work or independent study. The second is the L. It means learning culture. Okay? So in the traditional teacher-centered model, the teacher is the primary source of information. Okay, so again, in the traditional one, the primary source of information is the teacher. In the flipped learning model, it is the learner. Okay? Uh, it is the students or the learners who are considered as the center of instruction. Shifts instruction to a learner-centered approach, wherein class time is dedicated to exploring topics in greater depth and creating rich learning opportunities. As a result, students are actively involved in knowledge construction. Okay, so it's not plainly from the teacher. So again, in flexible learning, in facilitating learning, students should take the responsibility of their own learning. So in flipped learning, it is important for students to be actively engaged in the learning process. Gone are those days where the students just listen, just copy notes from the blackboard. Okay? So from day one up to the last, the teachers must instill to the student that it is important to value, okay, to value engagement of learning. Teach the students the value of engaged learning and curiosity. So they has to be always curious. They has to be there. They need to keep on questioning why this happened, why that happened. If you're given a learning material, do not just be dependent on the material. Do your own research. Research more. Okay. Then I stands for intentional content. Okay. So flipped learning educators continually think about how they can use the flipped learning model to help students develop conceptual understanding as well as procedural fluency. So a flipped classroom enables the teacher to offer materials for students to explore in their own time and to maximize the face-to-face interaction. The teacher has to determine which content will be directly given to the students, which content, okay, to include in the learning material. Okay? Educators use intentional content to maximize classroom time in order to adopt methods of student-centered active learning strategies depending on grade level and subject matter. Because there are subject matters that you do not need to directly give the students. You can ask them to do the research about that one. And P stands for professional educator. Okay, so in flipped classroom, the role of a professional educator is even more important and becoming more demanding compared to the traditional one. Okay, during class time, they continually observe their students, provide with feedback relevant in the moment because it's very important to provide students feedback. Do not allow the students to think that he is doing it right when he's not. Okay, provide constructive criticisms, assess their work. Okay, do not just accept submissions without giving them feedbacks, without reading it, without checking and assessing it. Okay, so how are we going to implement a flipped classroom? First is we plan. Okay, figure out which lesson in particular you wanted to flip. Outline the key learning outcomes and make your lesson plan. Okay, so in whatever we do, planning is very important. May it be in a flipped or traditional classroom, planning is very important. It must be the first thing that we do because without planning, then we won't have any direction. Second, record. Okay, instead of teaching the lesson in person, create a video. Make sure that the video contains all the key elements that you'd mention in your classroom. Then share. Send the video to your students. Make it clear. I hope I am doing a clear one. Make it engaging. Okay. Uh, Explain that during during the time the students visit the classroom or during the schedule of students visit to the classroom or face-to-face classes, the content of the video will be fully discussed. Okay, so there are lots of platforms that we can use to share the video to our students. Change, the fourth one is change. Now that your students have viewed your lesson, they are prepared to actually go more in depth than even before. Then group. Okay, separate groups where students are given a task to perform. Okay, create a separate group. For example, uh, one group are asked to write a poem regarding the lesson. Another one is to create a play regarding the lesson. The other one is to make a video. And remember to provide the students the rubrics. Okay? Give them the rubric to guide them and how they are going to prepare for your group group task or group performance. And the last one is regroup. Get the class back together to share the individual group's work with everyone. Ask questions, dive deeper than ever before. So that's how we're going to implement a flipped classroom. Okay? So still feedbacking is there. Okay, what do students do at home in a flipped classroom? They can watch online lectures, review online course material, they can read physical or digital texts, they can participate in an online discussion, and they can do their research. Okay? Another non-traditional uh, method is the inclusive learning environment. Okay? Teachers here differentiate between students of different abilities by giving them tasks of varying difficulty and complexity. Varying difficulty and complexity. Because when we say inclusive learning environment, it is a school or classroom where students of every ability level receive the same teaching in the same place. No one is left behind. Okay? Regardless of your status, regardless of your capacity, regardless of your gender, regardless of your beauty, you should be given or you are given the same treatment. Okay? That's how inclusive education works. So a teacher may create a single activity, however, pose different level of difficulty and complexity depending on the capability of the learners. Okay, so in one single activity for a single topic, the teacher can create different activities at different levels. Okay, so that's why it's very important to get to know your students not only by name, okay, but also on uh, their more than their name. Okay, dig or make it more personal so you'd also understand your students. Okay. An inclusive learning environment is defined as one in which students of all identities and backgrounds can thrive. So see, no one is left behind. Okay, everyone is part of the group. Whether you have a special needs, you are normal or not, in an inclusive learning environment, you are you belong. No one is left behind. And it's very challenging for a teacher to do that one. Okay, so we have to learn skills. Okay, so inclusive teaching involves deliberately cultivating a learning environment where all students are treated equitably. Treat them equally. Provide them with equal access to learning. Provide them the equal feeling of being valued and supported in their learning. Okay, so do not practice favoritism. Do not practice bias in your classroom. Okay? Attend to the different social identities of your students. Let them feel that regardless of who they are, regardless of where they came from, they are part of your classroom and each of your students are treated by you equally. Okay, so the inclusive teaching is relevant to all disciplines, regardless of the subject matter, and describes a foundational intention that can take the form of many different techniques and pedagogical strategies. So what are the effective strategies that we can use in inclusive teaching practices rather? First, apply universal design. Okay, the principles of universal design are intended to make course materials and learning experiences accessible and welcoming to all learners. So they guide instructors to vary their teaching strategies to meet learning needs and perspectives. Again, the answer to inclusive learning is varied strategies. Do not just settle on a single strategy, which may not be effective and applicable to other students in your class. Okay? Be patient enough, be innovative, be creative enough to look and design strategies to meet your individual learners' needs. Okay? Diversify course materials. Incorporate diverse perspectives by including readings from authors of many different identities and backgrounds. Okay? And then cultivate an inclusive climate. You set a tone for responsible and supportive class interactions. Okay? So, orient your class that your that they all of them, okay, are included in your class. No one is left behind, especially if you have mga like students from higher economic status. So take extra effort, okay, to teach them to treat each of his or her classmates equally. Communicate sources of support. Add an inclusion statement and information about available student resources to the syllabus and talk them about in class. Okay, so uh, you will be provided with the syllabus, okay, and in the syllabus there are references where you can also do your own research. Okay, so provide the students also another sources of informations, not only from your discussion. Okay. Number 5, model inclusive language by asking students about their personal pronouns using generic language. Everyone rather than you guys. So always make use of a language that will include everybody. So everybody, everyone, do not say you, me. Okay? So avoid generalizing your own experience or assuming that all students have had the same experiences as one another. Okay, like for example, you think that it's fine, the topic is very easy for you, but put yourself in the shoe of your student. Okay, am I doing it good enough for them to understand? Okay, maybe this student learns faster than the other one. Okay, so that's why it's very important to to be creative. Okay, to design varied activities and techniques and learning strategies. And number 6, build rapport. Take steps to get to know your students and facilitate opportunities rather, for them to get to know one another, especially during this time that we do not see each other face to face. Okay? So it's very hard for teachers to get to know the students better, aside from the names, and also it's hard for the students to get to know their teachers better. Okay, like in my case, I really find it hard to get to know each of you and even memorize your names and faces. Okay, so that's why I do require activities which you will show your faces. Okay, and then examine your own implicit bias. Consider how your own culturally bound assumptions may influence your interactions with your students, course materials, and the discipline. Reflect on your potential biases by inviting feedback from students and other observers or taking an online self-assessment. Be open to receive feedbacks and comments. Okay, feedback will help you improve yourself and your learning. Okay, to examine yourself also. In which specific aspect do I need to to improve? Okay, in which specific uh, task I am weak. Okay, how can I improve myself? So feedbacks will help us become better teachers. And then the last, foster a growth mindset. Provide opportunities for students to make mistakes and fail in a safe environment. Do not be mad if your students made mistakes. Do not be disappointed if your students fail. Okay, allow them to fail, to allow them to make mistake and then learn from their mistakes. Okay, allow them to fail and get up and become more stronger and learn from their mistakes. Okay? Allow them to try and try and try again and apply what they have learned through the process. Okay? So assist your students, facilitate their learning. So an inclusion teacher is a special education teacher who works with inclusion students. Okay, so when we say inclusion students, these are those who have disabilities but are able to function in the general education classroom, because there are students with special needs that are not enrolled in special education classes, because despite their disabilities, they are still able to interact and to function, okay, in a classroom of with the normal ones. Okay, so that is why it's very challenging to become an inclusion teacher. Okay, and so we need to study special education if you wanted to become a special education and inclusion teacher. Okay, so what are the duties of an inclusion teacher? First, accommodate inclusion students. So again, who are these inclusion students? These are those students with special needs but opted to enroll in a normal classroom setting. Modify assignments and tests based on the capacity of your individual learners. If you have a student whom you know cannot walk, okay, relying on a wheelchair, then do not ask all of the class to perform a dance. Okay, modify your task for this specific student who you know cannot manage to walk. Third, collaborate with the regular education teacher. Address parental concerns. Do not be deaf. Do not be blind with the concerns of the parents, because aside from you, and the parents knows best what's best for their kids. Okay, so address parental concerns. If necessary, call parental gathering, parental meeting. Okay, talk to the parents and guardians personally. Okay, so you will also be given assistance and complete the required paperwork, of course. Okay, another what we call this non-traditional teaching method is the engaged learning environment. Okay, so in an engaged learning environment, classroom become communities wherein learning happens. This allows students to feel connected to one another and to their teachers, and to engage in collaborative and active learning. Engage learning environment. From the term engage, the students are becoming an active learners, active participants of learning. So again, they do not just sit and receive informations. There are two main components of the engaged learning environment. We have student motivation and the active learning. So motivation is dependent on the student's value for learning and their expectations of being successful in learning. If a student is confident they can succeed and value gaining information, they will be highly motivated. But just like us, if we believe that we cannot do this, then our motivation is becoming less. But if we believe we can do this, the more we become motivated to perform a task. And student motivation greatly affects their learning. Okay? If the student believes that this task is very hard to do, is impossible for him to do, then he will become less, what we call this, interested to perform the task. If the student believes that the lesson is very hard for him to understand, then he will become less interested to study the specific lesson. Okay, so active learning, on the other hand, does not refer to the physical movement, but to the student's mind being actively engaged in the learning process. Okay. Students are dynamic participants in their learning and are provided opportunities to connect prior learning to new discoveries. Okay? Assimilate new learning to the prior learning. They let their prior learning help them to discover something new, resulting in deeper connections that make it more likely they will understand and retain the knowledge. Okay, so we know that we are in the Philippines, we are employing the spiral curriculum. So lessons from grade 1 to 3 will be repeated in high school and college, but of course, of a different level of difficulty and complexity. And the student's knowledge in simple mathematics can be used in high school when he already touched the topic of more complicated mathematics. Okay, so modern teaching methods, which rely heavily on lectures and PowerPoint presentations, often turn students into passive receivers of knowledge rather than become active participants in learning. Okay, when the teacher is the one who keep on talking, then passive learning is developed instead of uh, encouraging active learning. Okay, an engaging learning environment is one that encourages pupils to connect with the teaching subjects. Okay, connect. With the correct consideration, a classroom can remove distraction, foster teamwork, and put all focus on learning. And research learning learning environment increases students' attention and focus. Okay, uh, I know you have also experienced a traditional teaching method wherein you listen, you take down notes, and what happened when you become bored, when you feel boredom, you tend to draw your teacher's face. You tend to count how many times your teacher mispronounced a word. But with engaged learning environment, the student's attention and focus is increased. Meaningful learning experiences is promoted, and higher level of student performance is encouraged. Okay, so in short, higher level of critical thinking skills is motivated on our students. Okay, how to create an engaging learning environment. First, consider the classroom layout. Avoid traditional rows. Okay, when we see traditional rows, the one row, another one. Okay, so arrange our classroom into a more collaborative setup where students can easily collaborate and work with each other. Okay, consider the layout, the seating arrangement. Furniture choice. Colorful classrooms with various textures to make our classroom look more engaging. Clutter-free. Keep the focus on learning. Do not put just anything in your classroom which can catch the attention of your pupils. Okay? Like for example, uh, displaying something which are not relevant in the classroom. Okay? While you are giving them activity, you're also turning on the TV. It keeps their focus away. Outdoor learning. Break the monotony rather. Provide them breaks from the usual inside classroom setting. Take them out. Say, for example, your lesson is about butterflies. Then you may take them out of the classroom so they can see the real butterflies. Okay? What are the benefits of an engaged learning environment? So, increases student interaction with peers and teachers, provides students with frequent feedback, requires increased time, effort, and investment for tasks, offers students the opportunity to apply their learning in other situations, and gives them the opportunity to experience diversity. When we say diversity, variation, experience different tasks. Do not just give them from prelim to midterm or from first quarter to fourth quarter quiz, written quiz. Okay? It may become boring on the part of the students. Provide them varied activities. Okay? So another non-teaching method is the pre-lecture presentation, which is often used in classes where students are learning a new subject. A pre-lecture generally takes the form of an overview of the entire class assignment or lesson. pre-lecture, okay, with a brief overview of the key points of the material covered throughout the semester. It's not the thorough lecture, pre-lecture, before the material or before the actual material is given. It's like an overview of what the topic is all about, and often used in preparation for longer term assignments. Okay, so let us now move on to the 14 learner-centered psychological principles. So what makes these principles important to the to facilitating learning? Okay, so let us see how these principles can help us provide or facilitate learning. How these principles can help us become a more effective teachers rather. So the principles focus on psychological factors that are primarily internal to and under the control of the learner rather than conditioned habits or physiological factors. And they are intended to deal holistically with learners. So holistic, the whole, okay, in the context of a real-world learning situations. So the principles are divided into four categories. We have first the cognitive. Okay, so the first category is the cognitive and the metacognitive factors. Okay, so number one, nature of the learning process. The learning of complex subject matter is most effective when it is an intentional process of constructing meaning from information and experience. When we say intentional process, it is to the point where the learners becomes goal-directed. Okay, when the learner has the intention to really learn, when this learner becomes active in his own learning. Okay, so learning can be successful when a student is becoming self-regulated, meaning to say he knows what he's doing. Okay, he knows if he really is learning or not. Okay, he knows how to assume personal responsibility for contributing to their own learning. And second, goals of the learning process. Successful learner over time and with support and instructional guidance can create meaningful, coherent representations of knowledge. Okay, so educators rather can assist learners in creating meaningful learning goals that are consistent with both personal and educational aspirations and interests. Okay, so the strategic nature of learning requires students to be goal-directed. Students need to create his own objective, his own goals of learning. Okay, so again, when we say facilitated learning, it's more on the thought that learning is the responsibility of the students. The third is the construction of knowledge. So successful learner can link new information with existing knowledge in meaningful ways. Okay? The successful learner is able to connect prior knowledge to the new knowledge he learned, is able to see the connection of the new learning to his previous learning. Okay, so educators can assist learners in acquiring and integrating knowledge by a number of strategies such as concept mapping, thematic organizing, or categorizing. So ask your students to do this one. So he would also learn to categorize uh, the informations that he learns. Okay, another is the strategic thinking. The successful learner can create and use a repertoire of thinking and reasoning strategies to achieve complex learning goals. Okay, all the things a person is able to do. Learning outcomes can be enhanced if educators assist learners in developing, applying, and assessing their strategic learning. Okay, so uh, when we see successful learners, they're able to use strategic thinking in their own approach to learning. They're able to know how to strategize to solve a specific problem. They understand and they can use variety of active strategies to help them reach learning and to help them reach the performance goal that they desire and they set for themselves. Number 5 is thinking about thinking. Higher order strategies for selecting and monitoring mental operations facilitate creative and critical thinking. Successful learners can now reflect on how they think and learn. They can now set reasonable learning or performance goals. They know what to do when a problem occurs. They know uh, if they are making progress. They know if they are becoming stagnant. Okay? Uh, they know what how can they generate alternative methods and alternative solutions if the ones that they use are not working. And the sixth one is the context of learning. Learning is influenced by environmental factors, including culture, technology, and instructional practices. So learning does not occur in a vacuum. Learning does not occur in just one single click or tick of your fingers. So the teachers here play a major interactive role with both the learner and the learning environment. The teacher should assist the child or the student to to na, to be able to create a connection, okay, between him as the learner and the learning environment as well as the learning resources. So remember that cultural or group influences on students can impact, okay, many educationally relevant variables such as their motivation, their orientation towards learning, because there are groups which do not value education as much as we do. There are culture who treated education different as much as how we how we see its importance. Okay? So the classroom environment also uh, can affect the or can impact the students' learning. So the second category is the motivational and affective factors. And the principles under this one, we have motivational and emotional influences on learning. What and how much students is learned is influenced by the motivation. Okay, so that I have said earlier. No matter what the teacher will do, if the students does not find him or does not see for himself the motivation to learn, then uh, his degree of motivation or willingness to learn will affect how much he or she will learn. Motivation to learn is influenced by the individual's emotional states, beliefs, interests, goals, habits of thinking. So that's why it's very important to what do you call this one? To think positive. It's very important to teach our students to become more to believe in themselves. Okay? So positive emotions such as curiosity generally enhance motivation and facilitate learning and performance. If you observe, if a student is curious, so the more he become interested, okay, to learn something. The more he become motivated to learn something. Number 8, intrinsic motivation to learn. Okay, when we say intrinsic motivation, it's coming from the student himself. Okay, if the student wanted to learn because he wanted to improve himself, he may be more motivated, okay, compared to he just wanted to learn because that's what her mother wanted for him. Okay, the level or degree of motivation differs when the student himself is intrinsically motivated. Okay, effects of motivation on effort. So acquisition of complex knowledge and skills requires extended learner effort and guided practice. Without motivations to learn, the willingness to exert this effort is unlikely without coercion. So effort is another major indicator of motivation to learn. If we do not see in the student the effort, then it indicates that the student is not motivated and not interested to learn. Okay, so we as educators, as teachers, we need to be concerned with facilitating motivation by giving them strategies that enhance their effort and their commitment to learning. Okay, so we find effective strategies, so we look for effective strategies to include, okay, to use in our class. Okay, we can include purposeful learning activities. We can we can we can use mga collaborative, okay, strategies, collaborative works, and then the developmental and social factors first. Developmental influences on learning. As individuals develop, there are different opportunities and constraints for learning. Learning is most effective when differential development within and across physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domain is taken into account. So we do not just focus on a single aspect. We need to consider the general, the whole. Okay? We need to consider the physical, the intellectual, emotional, and the social domain of our students. So we need to be aware of understand uh, the the developmental differences of our students, because our students are coming from different social environment, different family, different upbringing, okay, different economic status. So we need to understand that one, because all of those factors affects their learning. Okay, number 11, social influences on learning. Learning is influenced by social interactions, interpersonal relations, and communication with others. So when the learner has an opportunity to interact and to collaborate with others on instructional tasks, learning can be enhanced. Okay? If you have observed, if you are belonging to a group of individuals who are leaders, so you are also becoming one. But if you tend to associate yourself with a group of individuals who are not fond of studying but who dedicated their time in playing ML, for example, then even though you are not an ML player, one day you will become one, because you will be influenced by your social environment, by your friends. So learning settings that allow for social interactions and respect diversity encourage flexible thinking and social competencies. Okay, so our family, our friends, and everyone that surrounds us may affect our learning. Okay, so the individual differences factors, this is the last category. We have individual differences in learning. Learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities. Do not expect Pedro to learn as much as Maria. Do not expect Juan to learn as fast as uh, Samuel. Okay, so all of them have are unique. All of our students are unique. They learn differently. They have different weaknesses. They have different strengths, and that's one thing that we should also consider. Okay, we should consider that every individual is born with different capabilities and talents. We cannot, for example, we cannot provide them project, and one of the criteria is the voice quality. Okay? Because some may be a good singer, but others are not. Okay, so it would be unfair for those who are not born singers if one of the criteria of your project is the voice quality, when you are only after of the content of the song. Okay, so next we have learning and diversity. Learning is most effective when differences in learners' linguistic, cultural, and social backgrounds are taken into account. Still, respect the differences of our learners. Okay, so for example, Do not force your learner to pray, to do the sign of the cross when it's against the religion. Do not force your learner to memorize the what we call this Holy Mary, Hail Mary, if it's against the religion. Do not force them to believe in saints if he doesn't want to. Again, take into account individual differences. Okay, they are different, or they are unique individuals. The last, standards and assessment. Setting appropriately high and challenging standards and assessing the learner as well as learning progress. Include diagnostic process and outcome assessments as integral parts of the learning process. So there should always be assessment. Okay? Assessment provides important information not only to the teacher but also to the learner. So he will understand his learning progress. Okay? Conduct ongoing assessment. Do not just do not just settle on giving them the activity. Provide feedbacks. Okay? Mga performance assessments, self-assessments. Set a standard. So your students can also know or will also be guided, okay, on how much he needs, how much effort he need to give to that specific task. Okay. So for your project, so this is already a project. I want you to create an own composition. So own composition, it may be a song or it may be a poem, but you need to perform it. Okay, if you believe you if you think you wanted to sing, then you can do it. Okay, if you wanted to perform the poem, then you can do it, as long as we are into one direction. In your composition, express your own point of view about the concept of facilitating learning and non-traditional way of teaching. Facilitating learning and non-traditional way of teaching. Okay, so in doing your project, please be guided with the following rubric. So you will be graded based on your promptness of submission, content completeness and accuracy, overall presentation and package, and proficiency. So for the deadline of the submission, please check it in our Google Classroom. So that's all for this lesson. If you have questions, you may comment down in the Google Classroom where this material is uploaded. Thank you everyone and have a great day.